Hey guys, tonight we begin with a little trip back to the Romans. So, dim the lights, make sure your blanket situation is secure, and maybe keep your phone on silent. Because honestly, nothing ruins ancient history like a sudden notification. The Roman Empire. You've heard of it. You've probably seen Russell Crowe swinging a sword in Gladiator and thought, wow, this looks epic. But here's the thing. Real Roman life was less about slow-motion battles under inspirational soundtracks, and more about emperors making bizarre lifestyle choices, family drama that would make reality TV producers weep with joy, and a whole lot of dynastic nonsense. So tonight, instead of marching through military conquests or boring Senate reforms, we're floating gently across the weird personal secrets of Rome's rulers. The emperors, the elites, the so-called noble families who, spoiler, were often about as noble as a raccoon in a dumpster. And our journey starts, naturally, with the man who kicked it all off, Augustus. Augustus, the chill dictator. Augustus, born Gaius Octavius, is one of those names you can't escape in Roman history. He was the great-nephew of Julius Caesar, and after Caesar was stabbed to death in that whole et tu Brute fiasco, little Octavian here ended up inheriting everything. Which sounds nice, right? Except what he inherited was basically a violent mess, a nation in civil war, and more political enemies than you'd want at a family reunion. Now, the funny part is, Augustus was kind of boring, at least compared to most emperors. He wasn't known for wild parties, or setting cities on fire, or making senators dress up like chickens. No, Augustus was calculated, cold, and very good at pretending to be humble while quietly grabbing absolute power. He loved presenting himself as the first citizen, not the dictator. Of course, he was absolutely the dictator, but he made it look casual, like someone insisting they're just helping out with the project while also writing everyone's performance reviews. What's extra ironic is that Augustus was famously frail and sickly. Ancient historians describe him as being weak, thin, and constantly ill. Not exactly the marble-chiseled hero we imagine. He was basically Rome's founding emperor who spent half his life bundled up in a blanket, sipping on herbal tea, probably whining about the draft. Tiberius, grumpy uncle of Rome. When Augustus finally shuffled off, power passed to his stepson Tiberius. And oh boy, if Augustus was a bit boring, Tiberius was the definition of please don't invite him to dinner. Tiberius was brilliant at military strategy, but terrible at literally everything else. He hated politics, he hated socializing, and by most accounts, he hated people. Imagine the emperor of Rome living like a cranky old man who just wanted everyone to years, surrounded by rumors of bizarre behavior. Some say he indulged in dark, twisted habits with his attendants. Others claim it was exaggerated propaganda. Either way, Rome was left with the image of its emperor hiding in a seaside villa, sulking and being creepy, while the Senate back home tried to guess if he was still alive. Oh, and fun fact, he didn't even attend his own mother's funeral, which, in Roman society, was about as scandalous as refusing to like a family member's Facebook post. Caligula, Rome's favorite train wreck. Of course, after Tiberius came Caligula, and if you know anything about Roman emperors, you know Caligula is where things really start to go off the rails. Caligula was young, charismatic, and initially loved by the people. The Senate thought, finally, someone normal. Which is hilarious, because within a year he was declaring himself a god, building golden statues of himself, and, allegedly, trying to make his horse a senator. Now, was the horse thing true? Hard to say. Ancient historians loved exaggerating. But still, the image of an emperor gently feeding oats to his political colleague is just too good to pass up. What we do know is that Caligula had a flair for humiliating Rome's elites. He enjoyed making powerful men run beside his chariot, dressed them in ridiculous costumes, and laughed as senators had to grovel before him. He also spent insane amounts of money on parties, games, and massive building projects that no one needed. And physically? Well, ancient writers describe him as pale, skinny, with thinning hair and bulging eyes. So, naturally, he was nicknamed Little Boots, because apparently nothing says future emperor like being mocked for your childhood footwear. His reign lasted just 4 years before he was assassinated by his own guards, which, to be fair, was probably the Roman equivalent of your co-workers finally staging an intervention after you've stolen one too many lunches from the office fridge. Claudius, the accidental emperor. After Caligula's assassination, the soldiers needed a new leader. And who did they find? Poor Claudius, hiding behind a curtain in the palace, praying no one would notice him. You see, Claudius had never been taken seriously. He stuttered, limped, drooled, and was considered weak by Roman standards. His own family basically treated him like a joke. But surprise, once he was dragged out and made emperor, Claudius turned out to be pretty good at the job. He expanded the empire, reformed the legal system, and tried to actually run things with some degree of competence, which made him very unusual. Of course, his personal life was a disaster. Claudius had multiple wives, all of whom were, how do I put this, either scheming, murderous, or both. Which brings us, naturally, to Nero. Nero is one of those emperors everyone knows by name, usually because of the whole fiddling while Rome burned story, which, by the way, is almost certainly made up, since fiddles didn't even exist yet. But hey, never let facts ruin a good meme. Nero was obsessed with being an artist. He sang, he acted, he wrote poetry, which sounds wholesome, except he forced Rome's elite to sit through his endless performances. Imagine being stuck in a theater for hours while your boss's kid insists on playing every role in the play. That was Rome under Nero. He also had the charming habit of eliminating anyone who annoyed him. His mother, executed. His wives, dead. His tutors, gone. Basically, Nero treated relationships like expired yogurt. Once he got tired of them, out they went. Physically, Nero wasn't exactly majestic either. Sources say he was overweight, had a double chin, and loved parading around half-dressed while pretending to be a Greek god. Again, the irony. He saw himself as the ultimate artist king, while most of Rome saw him as a sweaty man-child screaming into a lyre. Eventually, he lost control. A rebellion rose against him, and Nero fled the city. Cornered, he allegedly committed suicide while muttering, "What an artist dies in me," which, if nothing else, proves he never dropped the drama act. Smooth transition. And that's just the opening act. Rome was filled with emperors like this, awkward, sickly, cruel, or downright ridiculous. Each one left behind not just ruins and reforms, but bizarre personal secrets, embarrassing scandals, and unhealthy family trees. So, where were we? Ah, yes, Rome has just survived Nero, the sweaty theater kid of the empire. And now, you might think, surely things got better. Spoiler, no. Rome did what Rome always did, immediately plunged into chaos. Civil wars, generals fighting each other, and senators making faces like they had nothing to do with any of it. Out of this mess came the Flavian dynasty. And if you've never heard of them, don't worry. There's a reason most Netflix documentaries skip this bit. Vespasian, the dad who fixed things. First up was Vespasian. Honestly, he was like Rome's tired stepdad. After years of ridiculous emperors, the empire basically said, "Please, just someone who won't burn us down." And Vespasian delivered. He was practical, no nonsense, and loved money. Like, really loved money. This is the guy who introduced the first public toilets in Rome and then taxed people for using them. When criticized, he held up the coins and said, "Money doesn't smell," which, I have to admit, is kind of iconic. Physically, Vespasian was described as old, wrinkled, and constantly cranky. He wasn't glamorous, but he was stable. And in Rome, stability was a luxury item. By the later centuries, Byzantium had shrunk. It still had wealth, glitter, and grand ceremonies, but the substance was fading. Turkish armies pressed closer. Crusaders showed up, sometimes as allies, sometimes as looters. The empire was still a beacon of Christianity in the east, but its strength was hollowing. Inside the walls, emperors clung to rituals and traditions. Crowns glittered, processions dazzled, and choirs echoed in vast cathedrals. Yet beyond the gates, enemies gathered. Every victory was temporary, every alliance fragile. The empire that had once ruled the Mediterranean was now struggling for survival. As centuries passed, the pressure grew unbearable. The once golden empire became a shadow of itself. The power of Constantinople remained a symbol, but it could not stop the tide of change. Soon, the fate of Byzantium would be sealed, its glory remembered, but its rule lost forever. The final act came in 1453. The Ottoman Empire, led by Sultan Mehmed II, surrounded Constantinople. Cannons thundered against the ancient walls, shaking the very ground beneath the city. Inside, the people prayed, clung to hope, and watched as their last defenses crumbled. For weeks, the siege continued. The Byzantines fought bravely, but their numbers were too few. Food ran out, morale withered, and the once proud empire stood on the edge of collapse. Yet even in the darkest hour, the defenders of Constantinople refused to surrender. On May 29, 1453, the Ottomans finally broke through. Constantinople fell, and with it, the Byzantine Empire came to an end. The city became Istanbul, the jewel of the Ottoman world. The empire's 1,000-year legacy of glory, struggle, and survival was over, but its memory would live on forever.